welcome to Shattering Myths. I am Yahowah. This program is devoted to the most important and to the fastest growing segment of the world's societies, to those who know that political, religious, media, military, and economic institutions are corrupt, that they are counterproductive, and that we're wasting our time trying to fix them. Our mission, therefore, is to look behind the headlines, to know who is working against our interests, to understand who they are and why they're doing so. Because exposing and condemning errant and treacherous schemes isn't hateful. It's the most caring thing we can do. In our concluding hour, as we normally do, we're going to use evidence and reason to explore the Torah, which means teaching, not law, because its covenant is empowering and it provides the only answer for you and your family. Our phone number, if you'd like to participate in this discussion anytime over the next 3 hours, is 877-300-7645. It's always my pleasure on Fridays to welcome a very good friend, a man who I have the utmost respect for. He is al-Rassooli. He is the author of several books, a series called Lifting the Veil, The True Faces of Muhammad and Islam. No one knows or understands the religion of Islam and the consequence of tolerating it better than he does. IQ, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
IQ, there's a headline. This was reported by the Associated Press. Dateline was Beirut because there are no journalists in Syria. You're free to explain why you think there are no journalists in Syria, but this is the opening line. It reads, extremists, Islamic rebels, overran a village in central Syria, populated by the Alawite minority, and killed at least 40 people, human rights activists said on Monday. The report on the attack in the village of Man in the central Hama province came as the Syrian Red Cross was trying to get a ceasefire in the besieged city of Homs extended so that it could deliver more aid and evacuate more people from the area. It's an interesting term, is it not? Extremist Islamic rebels.
It's a misleading term.
Yes, it is.
They use extremist, they use radical, they use militant, and they don't know what the hell they're talking about, in fact. As if there are shades in Islam. There are no shades in Islam. Islam is radical, extremist, militant, intolerant, ungodly.
Yeah.
Back to you, sir.
Yeah. In fact, Erdogan, who the West has embraced as their messianic figure in the Islamic world. Now, he happens to be a fundamentalist Muslim and is systematically destroying Turkey. But nonetheless, in the West, he is seen as a moderate. And when he was asked about moderate Islam, and therefore the brand of Islam that the West likes to associate with him, do you recall what he said?
Yes, he said there are no shades in Islam. He said there is no such thing as a moderate Islam.
Right.
That's what he said.
Yeah. Islam is Islam. And when you analyze the Quran and Hadith, as you and I have done, and you deal with what Muhammad and his wannabe God had to say about fighting, about killing, about using all weaponry available, and about who the targets are and how long Muslims are to fight, is there any possible way to see Islam as either moderate, tolerant, or peaceful?
Not a chance in hell. And that's, with all due respect, I have over $1 million worth of challenges, literally over $1 million worth of challenges, to prove that there is such a verse in the Quran that shows any compassion and mercy towards unbelievers. There are 6,236 verses. They can't find a single one.
Yeah, and what's amazing about that too is that the first 90 of 114 surahs were revealed allegedly in Mecca, where Muhammad's only foe was his neighbors, his fellow tribesmen. his relatives were really his only foe. And it was just a nasty tit-for-tat argument with Muhammad making claims that his neighbors knew were ridiculous. I mean, those who knew Muhammad best knew that he was a complete fraud, that he was in it for self-serving reasons, sex, power, and money. But it really isn't until the last 24 surahs, those revealed in Medina, yesteryear's Yathrib, where Muhammad goes terrorist on the world, where he declares that he was made victorious with terror, and where his Quran and his Hadith have a singular message: fight in Allah's cause, or we will have good Muslims kill you.
And good Muslims are jihadi Muslims.
Correct.
Every single one of them.
Right. No, he defines that. And in fact, in the 9th surah, he makes it eminently clear that a good Muslim, all good Muslims are jihadists, and that if you are a peaceful Muslim and you do not engage in jihad, then according to the Quran, you cease to be a Muslim, and jihadi Muslims, the good ones, are supposed to kill the bad ones.
Absolutely correct. Yes. You know, what is amazing about the whole thing, when somebody reads the hadith, they always tell you that it was the Quraysh, the family of Muhammad, who assaulted him, when in fact they never did.
Correct.
It was Muhammad who insulted his own tribe, insulted their religion, insulted their history, and insulted their tradition, and then he came to be a victim. And Muslims, 1400 years later, always claim to be victims when in fact they are the victimizers.
Correct. You know, what's interesting about that, too, is that while the Muhammad mocked their religion, he embraced every aspect of their religion. The Quran is simply a restatement of the religious practices of the Arabs living in that part of Arabia.
He Islamized pagan tradition of Arabia. That's all he did.
That's all he did.
He
You're right.
literally repackaged it.
Yeah.
Every single Muslim for the last 1400 years, everything they do, the way they pray, where they pray, the Hajj, the circumambulation of the Mecca, of the Kaaba, all of them were pagan traditions, each and every one of them.
Yeah, and for the Christians that are listening to this program, I'm not going to have you comment on this, but because we're going to move back to what's happening in Syria. But for Christians living in this program, don't get very comfortable, because all Christianity is Christianized terms applied to the pagan religions of Babylon, Egypt, Greece, and Rome. So this is a very common practice in religion, to give pagan practices new names. This term, speaking of names, extremist Islamic rebels. You know, to their credit, the Associated Press did use Islamic before rebels, although they should have used jihadists, because Islam does have a term for an Islamic rebel. And they're really not rebels in the sense of, that would be inferring rebellion. They're Islamic for sure, but rebellion isn't the case. They're not rebelling. They're adhering to Islam. They're fundamentalists. But you know what happened, IQ, is that when Ayman al-Zawahiri affirmed that the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria was not in any way, shape, or form associated with al-Qaeda, that al-Qaeda has never funded them, al-Qaeda has never governed them, and al-Qaeda has not inspired them, that al-Qaeda has nothing to do with them. The old knee-jerk reaction that used to be rebels associated with al-Qaeda, blank, blank, blank. They can't say that anymore. And so they've gone back to verbiage they used, 8 or 9 years ago by calling the jihadist extremists. But, of course, that's completely misleading. It's a step backward, if anything.
But they've been misleading American and European populations for the last literally 60 years. It's not started today. It wasn't even started on 9/11.
No.
The terms of extremist and radical were used by the news media long before fundamentalist Islam started growing up into a mushroom crowd of enormity.
Yeah.
This is not, they've been deceiving people. They continue to deceive people using words which are not descriptive of reality.
Correct. Is it not true, IQ, that 100% of Islamic terrorists, 100% of Islamic jihadists are fundamentalists?
They have to be. And 100% of all acts of terror around the world against infidels are by fundamentalist Muslims.
As a matter of fact,
not 99.9, it's 100%.
Yeah, and there was a period of time where it was in the high 90s, the acts of terrorism perpetrated in the world being perpetrated by fundamentalist Muslims. But you're right today, it is beyond 99.9%. If a terrorist act is perpetrated in the world today, Islam has exclusivity. You want to eliminate terrorism today? Eliminate Islam. And if you don't eliminate Islam,
that's the only way to do it. Literally, right. That's the only way to do it.
Right. In fact, if you're not willing to denounce Islam, to go to war against Islam, there is no chance to diminish the constant increase of Islamic terrorism, as a whole. But to go to war against Islam, my view has always been, and I think it's yours as well, that the most effective tool to use against Muslims aren't bullets, they aren't bombs, they aren't armies. In fact, that makes Islam stronger. But instead, words.
Correct. The worst nightmare, the four horsemen of the apocalypse of Muhammad and Islam, are called knowledge, 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 and knowledge. That's knowledge of the Quran, knowledge of Muhammad, knowledge of Sharia. They self-destruct, by the way.
Yes. Yeah, the more, in fact, I would say, and I think this is still true, that it is impossible for someone to read Lifting the Veil, your book, or Prophet of Doom, my book, on both of which are devoted entirely to the Islamic Quran and Hadith. It would be impossible to read either from cover to cover and remain a Muslim.
With all due respect, if they read the first 10 chapters, if they read my first 10 chapters, they can't be a Muslim.
Yeah, in the case of Prophet of Doom, it would be possible to remain a Muslim and read the first 10 chapters because I present the Quran chronologically, and Muhammad just starts off stupid. I mean, it's just a sea of absolute, unbridled idiocy that he begins Islam with. It's not until he moves into the Islamic era and leaves Mecca in shame that he becomes a ruthless, raping, pedophilic terrorist. Shattering Myths, I'm Yahowah. We're talking with IQ al-Rassooli. IQ, there's another statement here from this report that I'd like to share with you. This is a report of what took place when 40 people were massacred in the small village in Syria, all by the Sunni jihadists. Half of the victims in the attack, which occurred, and it was this weekend, it's on Sunday, were civilians, including women, while the other half were villagers defending their homes. The Syrian state media described the attack as a massacre perpetrated by terrorists. And then the report reads, Islamic extremists, including foreign fighters and Syrian rebels who have taken up a hard-line al-Qaeda-style ideology, have played an increasingly prominent role among rebel fighters.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing. I'm sorry, I'm laughing.
But I am too. I read this stuff, and you just have to scratch your head and say, what in the world is wrong with us? How could we be so stupid?
Well, let me say this to the listeners.
Yes.
Islam is a pathogenic war machine whose ideas are based entirely upon the warped secretions from the mind of their mentor Muhammad that facilitate the recruitment of similar criminally minded human beings such as murderers, rapists, thieves, and traitors, because the hate-mongering, misogynist, duplicitous, warmongering, racist, intolerant, and ungodly verses of his Quran are music to their ears.
Yeah.
These people who massacred others, nothing to do with al-Qaeda, nothing to do or radical. This is Islam.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, of this raid, the Jund al-Aqsa Brigade, which was the perpetrator of the raid. It wasn't ISIS. It wasn't al-Nusra. It was a smaller fundamentalist Islamic terrorist group. It's called the Jund al-Aqsa Brigade, which overran the village. When they got there, they climbed on top of the rooftop, started waving the black jihadi flag, which comes right back to Muhammad and his black flag of jihad. And they were shouting Allahu Akbar. They were grinning from head to head, from ear to ear, and the video showed them looting the homes of those that they had savaged.
Wow, this is a repeat performance of Muhammad 1400 years ago. Exactly the same.
Exactly.
There are clones of Muhammad. I would like Americans who are listening. Every Muhammadan Muslim anywhere on the planet Earth is a clone of Muhammad. They have no choice. They read the same scripture. What are the scripture? Quran and Hadith, the foundations of Sharia.
When Muhammad savaged Kabar, for example, did they wave the black flag of jihad?
Yes.
Did they celebrate their carnage when they were decapitating the men, raping the women, enslaving the children? Did they gleefully, are they shown gleefully shouting out slogans as they committed these acts?
That's what the Hadith tells us in Arabic.
Yeah. And also, was there an element of looting? And if so, what role did looting play amongst the first Muslims, those who accompanied Muhammad on these terrorist raids?
The most important part of Muhammad's methodology was looting. Because with loot, he was satiating his criminally minded thugs, and he was having enough money to buy more arms and to deceive more people into joining him. Looting was very important. By the way, looting is still important in Islam.
Well, let me ask you a question then. If looting is important, you would expect there to be a Quran verse or maybe even a chapter that says that looting is not only lawful but good. Is there such a thing?
Al-Anfal.
What does that mean? What does that mean in English?
Plunder.
And so, how does it begin?
To tell you the truth, I don't remember, but...
It begins on the... I'll relay it in English. I'm a little rusty on my Arabic, which, by the way, is actually Hebrew, which I know pretty well. It says, stealing is lawful and good. Stealing, booty, plunder, depending on the way you want to translate the Arabic word, is lawful and good. That's how it begins.
Yeah.
It's the eighth surah of the Quran, if someone would like to validate this. I'm going to ask you another question. You've studied Al-Qaeda. Does Al-Qaeda have an independent ideology?
No.
So how can a journalist say...
Al-Qaeda is Al-Quran and Muhammad Sunnah.
Right. So how can a journalist...
Every Muslim who lives on planet Earth.
So it's impossible for there to have been an Al-Qaeda style ideology, correct?
None. They don't exist.
We'll return to Shattering Myths.
Representation of fact by people who are either stupid or malicious in trying to transfer. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. We're having a discussion with IQ al-Rassooli. IQ, the Syrian war is called a civil war. Is it being fought primarily between the dissenting political factions and in Syria, as civil war would imply, or is it really a proxy war? It's a proxy war. In fact, it's not dissimilar to the war in Spain before World War II with Franco, where foreigners came into Spain to fight on the side of the communists. It's not civil. Yeah. It's not a civil war. The civil war. Right. In fact, there are tens of thousands of foreigners
from all around the world, throughout Europe, throughout the United States, throughout the northern Islamic countries of Africa, even in Indonesia, as far away as Indonesia, tens of thousands of foreigners who've flocked to Syria to take part in what they call the Great Jihad. What is this war being fought over? If it's a proxy war, who are the sides and what is their agenda?
The agenda is simple: to create a caliphate, starting in Iraq and in Syria. They want to topple these governments, create a caliphate which will spread into North Africa and Asia.
And the last time there was a caliphate for Islam under the majority Sunni Islams, where was the capital?
It was Istanbul.
No, it wasn't Istanbul. The capital was Damascus, 100 years after Muhammad's death.
No. We talk about the caliphate now under the Ottoman Empire.
Oh, but that's the most recent one.
Yeah, I
asked the first one. The
first one is Damascus.
Yeah, Damascus. And Islam ruled the world out of Damascus for centuries. So they want to return to Damascus as their headquarters. Who is supplying the weapons to these Sunni jihadists?
The United States of America and Europe.
Yeah, and they're being funneled both directly through Iraqis in the American Awakening program and indirectly via Qatar and Saudi Arabia.
And Libya.
And Libya, of course. Well, yeah, and Libya is one of the most indirect because the Libyan weapons were American weapons funneled through Qatar to Libya, and per capita, the Libyans are now the largest, apart from Iraqis, obviously. So they would be the second largest foreign contingency. All right. Before we consider where this proxy war in Syria is going to lead, I want to compare it to something else, because we played this game before. Isn't it true that the United States played this exact same game of arming and equipping Islamic fundamentalist terrorists to overthrow a government? And didn't they do it in Afghanistan back in the late 1970s?
Yes. They are the same people who were working in 1970s. Their children and grandchildren are doing it now in Syria.
Okay, so it was the United States that provided about $5 billion worth of weaponry to fundamentalist jihadists, which we rented from the Pakistani government. They were called the Taliban and al-Qaeda. Is that correct?
That's also correct, but they were trying to do it to destroy the Soviet Union at the time.
Right. They wanted to. We wanted a proxy war in Afghanistan, so we armed Pakistanis, the Taliban and al-Qaeda, and we armed primarily Pakistani Muslims in the beginning. But once the United States showed a willingness to provide an enormous amount of weapons, and there was a genuine chance that the Taliban and al-Qaeda would overthrow the Soviet Afghani government. Wasn't it true that jihadists came to fight the Great Jihad from around the world?
Yes, exactly the same way.
Okay, so let's look at how that turned out.
From the Yemen, from North Africa, from Iraq, from everywhere.
Okay, so we have another parallel here, two parallels to the Syrian proxy war. Americans supplying weapons to oust a government that we did not like, and jihadists joining in from around the world. So let's take a look at how it turned out in Afghanistan. Was the Taliban government over Afghanistan that we empowered better or worse than the Soviet-backed government in Afghanistan?
Infinitely worse. Not just worse, infinitely worse. It was the Dark Ages again. The Dark Ages of Muhammad.
So our aiding and abetting the Taliban and al-Qaeda with weapons was actually counterproductive for the Afghani people.
Not only for the Afghani people, because it became counterproductive to America. The Twin Towers were destroyed by the same people.
Correct.
They created a monster.
Right.
Like Frankenstein. But in Frankenstein's monster, he was able to control him.
Yeah.
In this case, these monsters you cannot control.
Correct.
And the irony of it now, there is no Soviet Union. There is Russia, and Russia is laughing.
Right. And what's amazing here, and you already hinted at this, but that not only did we impose a government that was infinitely worse for the people of Afghanistan, and close to 1 million Afghanis lost their lives in this conflict that America started, which we don't seem to care about. When the Great Jihad was over, these Muslims all went back to their various countries, didn't they? They disseminated again around the world. And when they went to all these other countries, what did they do when they were there?
Well, they use the word Islamize them. That means radicalize them. You can't radicalize a Muslim.
Right.
A Muslim is already, but what they did, the seeds of greater jihad were started in every one of these countries.
Yes. And they began, in all of these countries, we began to see what we had never seen before, which was unbridled acts of Islamic terrorism on civilian populations. And it exploded around the world right after the successful American proxy invasion of Afghanistan. I'll say successful, in that America achieved its goals, even though its goals were immoral. But it spread fundamentalist Islamic terrorism at an explosive rate around the world in the immediate aftermath, did it not?
Correct. But the tragedy of it is America is continuing the same policy which was bankrupt in Afghanistan. It was bankrupt in Iraq, and they're continuing it. Now
that was my point. Yeah, that's my point. Is so now that we know what happened the last time we played this game. The last time America played this game was in Afghanistan. The government became infinitely worse. Millions of people died, and the jihadists who engaged in the Great Jihad disseminated around the world and began to perpetrate heinous acts of terrorism. Aren't we doing exactly the same thing? I mean, exactly the same thing in Syria?
But not only Syria. Look what happened in Libya. Libya was stable. Libya was one country under Gaddafi. Egypt was one country under Mubarak. Iraq was one country under Saddam Hussein. Now, Iraq is in 3 parts, Libya is in 2 parts or more, and maybe Syria will be 4 parts.
Yeah,
so I don't understand what they're achieving. They're not achieving anything. They're only destroying.
Yeah, I'm going to beg to differ with you on one small point. You're right that the United States played this game again in Libya. And we are obviously playing the game on a massive scale in Syria. The difference, though, between Libya and Syria is that in Libya, the United States flew bombers, and we, but our influence was fairly short-lived and rapid, and there wasn't much time for the Libyans to bring in additional jihadists from around the world. There were some foreigners that fought there, but for the most part, it was there were sufficient number of Libyan jihadists to do the deed. In Syria, because of the long, just like the Afghan war, this long period of constant American interference and armaments, it's now become a great jihad, just like Afghanistan was. So the scale is so much greater with I think it's somewhere now in the range of 100 different nations that have sent significant numbers of jihadists into that conflict. So unlike Libya, when the jihad was over, they just kept on killing one another. In Syria, it's going to be just like Afghanistan. The moment that conflict is over, they're going to go back home, and we're going to see an onslaught of terrorism worldwide.
Yeah, but not only that. Don't forget, Syria is nearer to Europe. And Syria is literally dislocating the whole of the governments of the Middle East. Jordan is now under threat. Israel is now under threat. Egypt is now under threat. It's not just Syria.
Right. Now, let me ask you this.
Other countries which are stable are becoming unstable. You've got 400,000 people, refugees coming from Syria into Jordan. Jordan is a very small, not small country, but it is a very poor country.
Right. Now, I'm going to ask you from this perspective as well. You've correctly stated that the jihadist Muslims coming from around the world, tens of thousands of them, to fight in the Great Jihad in Syria, Their aspirations are global, aren't they?
100% always. But this is the most remarkable thing about Islam. 1400 years ago, Muhammad declared unilaterally total war against humanity by dividing humanity into two parts: Islamic jihadists and non-Muslims.
Yes.
So it's not a new agenda.
No. But here in Syria, virtually every Syrian fighter is fighting for the imposition of Sharia law on the entire world. This is the great jihad to reestablish Islam as the dominant force in the world. So when this war winds down and they stop fighting between Sunnis and Shia, those jihadists that fought here...
against the West. They are going to turn against the West. No question about
correct.
it.
That's
and they will be
mindset.
much better trained, much more savvy in massacring than ever before in their history.
Right.
Yeah.
So what America has done here is maybe the single most suicidal thing America has ever done. And the only thing it could even rank up there in terms of equally suicidal would be the invasion of Iraq, which made this war possible. Had America not invaded Iraq and given Iraq to Iran, would this proxy civil war or proxy war in Syria be fought now? Would it even...
Not only in Syria, even the events of North Africa would not have happened.
Right. So we lit the flame that has started all of this. We caused it.
Box.
Yeah. And nothing but hellish Islamic jihadists are flowing out of it. We'll return with IQ al-Rassooli after the commercial break. Shattering Myths. We're in our last segment with IQ al-Rassooli, and I'd like to read something to you. IQ was written 2,700 years ago, and get your reaction to it. It begins a prophetic pronouncement regarding Damascus. Behold, Damascus is revolting and corrupt, and will be removed from among inhabited cities. It is degenerate and unrestrained, and shall be abolished. And she shall actually become a twisted and tangled heap of rubble. Abandoned and forsaken, destroyed will be the inhabited regions of the populated cities of Jordan and Lebanon. For there will be roaming animals, fighting in militias, who will fail miserably. And ultimately there will be no one left to terrorize. So the fortified place and the defensive structures will cease to exist on account of the northern kingdom, along with the government out of Damascus, including the remnant of greater Syria, for being similarly vehement and burdensome, fanatical and onerous, dim-witted and enraged. The children of Israel, those individuals who engage and endure with God, shall actually continue to exist, prophetically declares Yahowah of the vast array of spiritual messengers. And it shall actually come to pass in that day that the size of Israel shall be decreased to the point of no longer being sustainable. The fattest, the best protected, and most vital midsection of the nation shall be leaned, shrinking in size. Does that sound like today's and tomorrow's newspaper to you?
Very much so. Was it Isaiah?
Yeah, Isaiah 17, 1 through 4. There's something even more troubling about it. Not only does it predict Damascus is the longest continuing inhabited city in the world. Not only does it depict that in the last days here that Damascus is going to be destroyed, to become a heap of rubble, and it talks about the terrorists and them finally killing everybody to the point there's no one left to kill. It actually says that the outgrowth, the conclusion of all of this, is that the nations of the world are going to engage in a way that severs Israel at the waist. They've already given up Gaza. They give up the West Bank, which is what Kerry is trying to get Israel to do now. Israel will be 20 miles wide, where 70% of the population lives. It's unsustainable. Sounds like what God is predicting here is just as Neville Chamberlain sacrificed Czechoslovakia and started World War II. Sounds like the rest of the world now is going to sacrifice Israel. And that's going to lead to World War III.
I don't think they will continue to allow themselves to be sacrificed on the altar like they did with Czechoslovakia. I don't think so. I've been predicting that if push comes to shove, World War III will start there.
Yeah, World War III is going to start there. But according to God's testimony, this was 2,700 years ago, he says that Israel will eventually capitulate, that the world's going to force Israel to give up the West Bank, and that as a direct result of this land for peace deal, that the Islamic nations are going to declare war. It's going to be World War III.
Definitely. And in fact, I've got no doubt about it. It's not because I want to be evil, no.
No.
Like you, I look at the past, I look at the present, and I can extrapolate to the future.
Yeah. I mean, the saddest thing about this particular prophecy, from my point of view, is that the 18th chapter is a continuation of this, and it begins with woe, which means you ought to be real careful. You ought to pay attention. I'm not pleased. God says, woe to the land of whirling and buzzing wings. He's talking about, here it's a visual reference to our Apache helicopters. To a nation which is beyond in the opposite direction of the rivers of Cush. If you reach across the Mediterranean and recognize where Cush is, it's a direct line to Washington, D.C. And it says of this nation, it dispatches envoys by way of the sea, and so in floating vessels on the surface of the waters, the messengers travel, swiftly, indulgently, and immorally. This Gentile nation's people are tall, often intoxicated, and immodest, and have a propensity to take things from others. They are scrubbed clean, smooth skin, completely shaven, and yet typically reckless. These people are feared from here to there and beyond in a future time. It's a population comprised of many different races, routinely vomiting up and spewing out nonsense in a foreign speech, always trying to impose its will on others, trampling them underfoot. Sounds a lot like America, doesn't it, IQ?
Amazing. Amazing.
Amazing. Yeah, God predicted that we were going to do exactly what we have done. That's why I wanted to make this comparison between what we're doing in Syria and what we did in Afghanistan.